Now, let's go back to Michelle in New York City for the latest on the GM recall.
Phil, it's a nightmare that just doesn't end for GM. An internal probe into General Motors' recall scandal found a pattern of incompetence and neglect, but it did clear the car maker of conspiracy. CEO Mary Barra has announced that 15 employees have been dismissed over the fatally flawed ignition switches. Li-Ling Tang has all the details.
Addressing employees at GM's technical center in Warren, Michigan, CEO Mary Barra appeared contrite.
Overall, the report concludes that from start to finish, the Cobalt saga was riddled with failure, which led to tragic results for many.
Citing the report she commissioned by former U.S. Attorney Anton Valukas, Barra acknowledged that the company had misdiagnosed problems with its Chevrolet Cobalt, linked to 47 crashes and 13 deaths.
What Valukas found in this situation was a pattern of incompetence and neglect. Repeatedly, individuals failed to disclose critical pieces of information that could have fundamentally changed the lives of those impacted by the faulty ignition switch.
The car maker took more than a decade to recall 2.6 million cars with the defect, despite knowing about it as early as 2001.
15 individuals who we determined to have acted inappropriately are no longer with the company. Some were removed because of what we consider misconduct or incompetence. Others have been relieved because they simply didn't do enough.
Barra said the investigation found no conspiracy by GM to cover up the facts nor evidence of a trade-off between safety and cost. It also cleared Barra and other senior executives of direct involvement. What it found was that many employees operated in silos, not sharing information with others, and that the problem was perceived as a customer convenience issue rather than a safety defect. Barra expressed a commitment to doing the right thing and taking responsibility so that this doesn't happen again. She also announced a compensation fund for victims and their families. But industry observers are asking if her contrition and her compensation program are enough.
Well, one death is one too many, and as soon as they knew about this problem, they should have been on it. And the opportunity for them to do what they need to do in terms of public relations is probably over. They're going to have to work very hard and much harder now in order to get back their good name.
The full report is being submitted to U.S. regulators and Congress for review. Li-Ling Tang, CCTV, New York.
GM's ignition switch issues go back more than a decade, and here's a timeline. The faulty switch first appeared in the company's Saturn Iron back in 2001. The same problem popped up 3 years later under the Chevrolet brand. Now, there was talk of fixing the problem in early 2005, but the solution was dismissed as too expensive and too time-consuming. Instead, GM sent a safety warning for car dealerships to pass on to customers. The U.S. government's Office of Defects launched investigations in 2007 and 2010. Both turned up inconclusive. Now, late last year, GM linked the faulty key switch to dozens of car crashes. Now, to help us look under the hood of the GM recall scandal, we're joined by automotive expert Lauren Fix, also known as the Car Coach. Lauren, good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lauren, with the admission by GM in front of Congress of wrongdoing and the firings announced today and the internal investigation, do you think that GM COO Mary Barra has now done enough? What do you make of her response?
Well, I think that her response was very sincere, and she truly is upset about the situation. But as far as the overall picture of General Motors, I think that there still is more that needs to be done. At this point, they have some internal issues of their culture. They're making a lot of changes. They've added more safety staff. They're revamping their legal department, the way they communicate in their chain of command. And I think that's a beginning of what needs to be done, that consumers really want to see that they truly care more than just words. They want to see some actions.
Now, that's what GM can be doing, but what about the federal government? Last month, GM paid a $35 million fine. That's the largest ever assessed by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for failing to report the problems quickly enough. Now, GM did know about the problems with the ignition switches as early as 2001, as we just said. So can the government take any further action?
Well, there is going to be further action. I know that there's going to be another hearing in August, At that time, they'll have gone through, I'm sure, combed quite deeply into the 325-page report that was presented today. Also, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is going to be doing some more investigations on their part. They have some statements they would like to know how they're handling things now, and if they're not handling them appropriately, there will be additional fines.
All right, now, despite these recalls, GM has been doing remarkably well. Last month, sales rose 13% from a year ago, and it appears that the controversy has not put a dent in the automaker's continual expansion plans. Why are consumers not reacting to this?
Well, consumers are a little confused. It's funny when you mention to someone, do you have a GM car? They say, no, I have a Saturn, and I have spoken with many drivers. And I think people misunderstand that General Motors at the time had 8 brands underneath their window. They're now down to 4. So when people think I have a Buick, they think it's a brand that stands alone. And so there's a little confusion, or when I bought the car, they told me it had a Toyota engine. They're not thinking about, oh, that ignition switch is actually on my Saturn, or it's on my Pontiac. So these are things that consumers, either they don't communicate with each other, they don't understand, and that's something that has to be addressed.
So consumers don't realize that they're buying GM cars? Do you then expect a delayed impact on sales when consumers do actually finally register that about 15.8 million vehicles globally have been recalled?
Yes, actually, what's very interesting is they will eventually realize that because of the television, the internet. I mean, there's been plenty of coverage on this. In addition, the bulk of General Motors sales and profits do come from China. And that's an important factor to know, that GM sells more Buicks in China than they even sell in the United States in total. In addition, the fleet sales were up 21%. And fleet sales would be municipalities or government entities in addition to corporations. Now, mind you, when the government had their fingers into General Motors and they were actually running the business, at that point, they could have easily said that municipalities will now be buying GM vehicles for police departments and utilities. So it's very easy for fleet sales to increase.
Even if the recall so far hasn't been hurting sales, the fines, the claims, the lawsuit settlements, how much of an impact are they going to have on the company's financial turnaround, do you think?
Well, I think it's going to hurt them badly. They've already had the $35 million fee. Plus, of course, you're going to be putting quite a bit of money into the billions into this fund, which we haven't got all the details on. That should be coming out in the next few weeks. I think the biggest hurt to General Motors as a brand is the brand integrity. Consumers that love GM may be hesitant about going back to purchasing another one of their vehicles, and those people that thought it was a really good deal may go look at other brands, and you will never get them back. So overall, it has put a hurt on General Motors brands, all 4 of the ones that still exist. And globally, because they're under so many different brand names, it may not have as much of a financial impact as it does here in the U.S.
All right, lots to follow. Thank you so much for your insight, Lauren Fix, also known as the Car Coach.